Hello everyone, this is Pippin Williamson from Pippin's Pages and pippin'splugins.com, and what I want to show you in this tutorial is how we're going to go about writing a maintenance mode plugin like I released the other day. So just a couple of days ago I released a plugin called CGC Maintenance Mode Plugin for WordPress, and you can see the post here on my site. You can see the demonstration video. Here's a screenshot, and here's what it actually looks like live. This is our settings page. And what this plugin allows us to do is actually put our site into maintenance mode very easily and then restrict it by IP address. So we can provide a list of IP addresses that are allowed to see the site normally, and anyone else is redirected to either a page within WordPress or an external URL, whichever we choose. So to show you how this works really quickly, I put in this IP address right here, which is not mine. I save my options, and now when I try to go to the site, I actually get redirected to the maintenance page. You can see that if I try to browse away from the maintenance page, I go back to it. If I change this back to my valid IP address, then I'm allowed to browse around the site perfectly normal. So what I want to do is I want to show you basically how we go about writing this plugin, how it works. This is going to be a pretty lengthy tutorial, and it's going to be pretty in-depth, but it should be pretty easy to follow too. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start out writing our first file. We're going to name it maintenancemode.php, and the very first thing that you should always do is put your header information up here. And this is what actually defines your plugin. The next thing that we're going to do is actually put that file inside of a folder called maintenance mode. Just like that. Your plugin will now be available to WordPress, and you can activate it if you want to do this along the way as you're following this tutorial. So that will make it available. Now what we're going to do is we are going to create two other files. We're going to create one file that will be our admin page that will take care of all of this information right here, and then we'll write another file that actually does the redirects and the IP checking. So let's start with the admin file. Now this file itself is actually has a lot of information in it, so I'm not going to write everything by hand. I'm going to do a little bit of copy and pasting, but I'm going to explain what each part of the file does. So the very first thing that we need is a function that will display each of our settings and will generate all of the HTML for the settings page. So we're going to create a new file, and I'm just going to copy and paste my code in here, and then I'm going to explain what it does. Okay, so let me first save the file. We're going to put it inside of a folder called includes, and we're going to call it adminpage.php. Okay, so this is all of the HTML for our settings page that you can see right here. So the very first thing that we do is we actually load our global variable CMM options, and this is actually a variable that is going to contain all of the settings for our plugin. And I'll explain that a little bit more in just a moment. Next is we're doing nothing more here than actually outputting the HTML form. So for example, under the enable section, you can see that we have an input. It's a checkbox, and here's that checkbox right there. So that's all that this is really doing. All of this HTML right here. Let me go ahead and continue with the next function or two that actually takes care of saving the data, and then I'll go back and explain a little bit more of how this works. So that's our first function. Now what we need is a function that actually registers our settings with WordPress. So we're going to write a little function right here called that will register the plugin settings. We're going to call it CMM underscore register underscore settings. And just a note, notice that I've actually prefixed everything with CMM. That's this particular plugin's prefix. Always prefix your work. So next, inside of this function, we only need one thing, and that is the register settings function. Oops. And this is part of the WordPress settings API that actually allows us to do this. Then it takes two parameters. The first parameter is the name of the settings group. You can have multiple groups within one particular setting. In this case, we only have one group. And then the second parameter is actually the name of the settings. So we're going to call it CMM underscore settings. And that's it for that function. And now we actually need to, in order for this to take effect, we need to add in an action hook. So we're going to type in add action, admin init. So this is going to load when the admin section of WordPress loads. And now we're going to use our function right here as the callback. So just like that. Okay, and let's put in a little comment right here. Just kind of explains what that does. Okay, and now what we need, if you actually activated your plugin right now, you wouldn't see anything. So the first thing that we're going to do in order to tie all of this into our plugin is we're going to include it. And the way that we're going to do that is like this. First, we're going to put in a comment section, just like that. And now we're going to type in include. And then we're going to type the path to the file, just like that. So what this is essentially doing is bringing all of the information from the admin page.php file into this local, the main plugin file, just like that. So that will make it available. Now, one other thing that we need to do is we need to set up our global variable that is at the top of the admin page. So I'm talking about this global variable right here. Currently, if you just loaded the page right now, this variable would be empty. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to set that variable up to contain the information from the CMM settings option. So we're going to do that like this. CMM options equal get underscore option CMM underscore settings. Now notice that the CMM underscore settings right here matches the CMM settings right here in the register settings. So this is actually setting up the option. This is loading the option, and we're loading it into this global variable right here. Now this variable is global because it is outside the scope of a function. If I had loaded it inside of this function, it would not be considered global, but because it's outside of the scope of a function, it becomes a global variable. And in order to access it, we need the keyword global right here. Okay, so now our admin page is actually included into our plugin. So the only thing that we need to do now, because our plugin doesn't actually know where to display this admin page, we are going to actually add a link to the admin menu and have it reference this page. The way that we're going to do that is by writing another function, and we're going to call it CMM underscore settings menu. It's going to look just like this. And now inside of here, we're going to use the add submenu page function to actually load up our page. And this function will actually allow us to insert a link inside of another admin menu item. So, for example, we're going to use it to add a submenu to the settings page. If we wanted to add a top-level menu, we would actually use a different function. We would just use add menu page. But because we want to make it a submenu of an existing page, we're going to use the add submenu function. So it looks just like this. The first thing that we need is the page that it's going to be a submenu of. In this case, it's options-general.php. If you are not familiar with which page you need right here in order to get your menu in the desired place, go to the codex page for the add submenu function, and it gives you a list of all of the built-in ones. And next that we have is actually the title of our menu item, and in this case it's going to be maintenance mode. The next parameter is the title of the page. That's the title that would appear in the up here in your browser tab, which you can't see, but there now you can see it in the browser tab right there. Let me readjust my window. Okay, and then the next parameter is the capability that the user is required to have in order to access this page. And we're going to use the manage options ability, which means that they have to be an admin in order to access this page. And next is going to be the slug of our page, and in this case it can be maintenance mode. So when you go here, you will actually see in your browser URL, it will say yoursite.com/wp admin/options-general.php then question mark page equals maintenance hyphen mode. So this is your slug. That's what's going to show up in the URL. And next, the very last thing that we need is our callback function. We had our function up here. This is our CMM settings page. This is going to be our callback function. So we're just going to paste that function name in right there. And that's it. Our function there is done. Now, in order for this to take effect, we have to actually add in another action hook, just like this. We're going to use the admin menu hook. And now we're going to use the name of this function as the callback, just like that. Okay, now your admin page will be available in your plugin. And you should see, assuming you've done everything rightly and assume that I've shown you everything correctly, you will now have a page right here that says maintenance mode, and it will have all of this information in it. Also, you will be able to save any information you want. So, for example, you should be able to type in another IP address just like this. Take it, make it whatever you want. You could change the URL to say http://google.com and hit save options, and everything should keep. Now, note that your settings that we've just written aren't actually doing anything yet. All we're doing is storing them in our plugin option that you can in this option right here, the CMM settings, which we are retrieving over here. So now the next thing that we need to do is we need to create a new file. So we're going to go over here and we're going to create a new one, and I'm going to name it restrictaccess.php. We'll save that, and this file is going to do. It's going to take care of all of the IP checks and also the redirects that take care of actually either allowing a user in or not allowing them in. So the first thing we're going to do before we actually start writing that file is we're going to include that into our plugin. Just like that. Any file, just because a file is in your plugins folder does not make it available. You have to make sure that you always include it somewhere or other. So we have now included that file. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to write the function that will take care of redirecting to the maintenance page or the external URL if the user is not authorized. So we're going to name our function cmm_restrict access, just like this. And now, one of the first things we're going to do inside this function is we're going to load in our global CMM options. Remember, because our options are loaded right here, it's globally available. And by defining global here, we're able to get access to all of the options that we're saving over here. So now, once we've done that, we have this option right here that just says enable. So we're going to first do an if check that says if CMM options enable each of your options inside of your settings. They're each available inside of this. CMM options is an array. So each of your options is available at a particular index of that array. So before I go further, let me actually explain that a little bit further. Sorry, I missed that. So on your admin page, see here we have CMM settings and then bracket enable, CMM settings bracket enable, and then CMM options enable. So basically, we're setting each of our settings is put into one index of the array so that we can access it. If you wanted, you could technically create one option like this for every single setting and store them all individually. However, that's extremely expensive in terms of resources. So instead, we set up one array and then set up each of our options as an index in that array. If that doesn't make enough sense or you would like to learn more, look up how the WordPress settings API works. It's really pretty cool. So what we're going to first do is we're going to do an if check to see whether or not the enable option is checked. And in order to do that, all we have to do is if CMM options enable. Basically, this says if this option is set to true, aka if it's checked, then proceed. If it's not checked, we're not going to do anything because there's nothing else down below this if check. So that's the first thing. Next, what we want to do is we actually want to set up an array that contains all of our IP addresses in here. And what we're going to do is this. We're going to set up a variable, call it IPs, equal array map trim. I'll explain what all this does in just a moment. Explode new line character. Then our CMM options IPs. That's the option that actually references the IP field right here. So what's happening here is the first thing that we're doing inside here is we are first retrieving each of the IPs, then we're using the explode function, which will actually take each of the lines in this text area and separate them into individual indexes in the array. This parameter right here says that we want to explode them on the delimiter of the new line character. Now, on a very important note is notice that these are in double brackets, this option. If this is in single brackets, it won't work. It's just a little important thing that you should always know, that this new line character will not be interpreted correctly if it's not in double brackets. So this right here puts each of our items, each of our IPs into a single array. Then we're using the array map function to basically clean up that array, remove any white space, etc., and make sure that everything is mapped correctly. Then we just need to close that off with a semicolon. Okay, so now each of our IPs is available inside of this array. And now what we can do is this. We want to do a check that says, okay, have we chosen a page or a URL? So we're going to say if CMM options page or URL, that just happens to be what that option is called back over here, and you can see that page or URL right there. So if page or URL equals page, just like that, then we are going to do the necessary things that we need to do in order to redirect to our page. Else if CMM options page or underscore URL equals URL, we're going to do what's inside of these brackets. And that's it. So one thing that you'll notice is that I'm not doing any else at the end here. So what I'm actually doing is actually doing a safe check, basically, that says if they've never saved the plugin options, we're not going to do anything anyway. This function is basically going to go in here. It's not enabled, so it's going to skip. If it is enabled, but they've never chosen one of these options, it's just going to go to the end here and skip and not do anything. So next, what we're going to do is we actually need to now write another conditional that basically says if the current user's IP address is valid, let them see the page. If it is not valid, then we need to redirect them to whatever page. So the way that we're going to do that is this. We're going to do CMM underscore IP test. This is a function that we're going to write in just a moment. We're going to pass our array of IPs that we set up just a moment ago to it. If it equals false, so that means that they did not pass the IP test. So we're going to say if they did not pass the IP test and this other parameter is not. So if it is not this page, int val CMM options page, just like that. Okay, so what this says is this. First, we do a test for their IP. If it is false, then this section of the conditional validates as true. In other words, it will jump us in here. And if we are not on the page for this option, page. Now, what this is up here in our settings page, we have our maintenance page right here. We have our redirect page. And you actually get to choose the page that you want to redirect to. Now, if I look at the source code really quickly, you'll see that this select, each of these options has the page ID inside of it. as the value, and then the name is simply the page name. And you can see that over here in the code as well. So we go over here to our redirect page. First of all, we get all of our pages with the getPages function, and then we do a for each on those pages because this returns an array of pages, and we echo the page ID number into the value field, and then the page name into the option name. So what we have to do is we have to make sure that we're not already on that maintenance page. So if we have chosen maintenance over here, excuse the phone ring. So if we're on maintenance over here, what we want to make sure of is that if we're on the maintenance page, that we don't actually try to redirect them back to this page, because what that's going to do is it's going to create an infinite loop. You're on the maintenance page, you get redirected to the maintenance page, then you get redirected to the maintenance page again, and you never end, and it will actually break your system. So we have to do a check to make sure that we're not already on this page. So the way that we do that is we say if not page, and then int val, just make sure that this is an integer value, and then CMM options page contains the ID number of that page. So if we are on this page and our IP address was invalid, we would stay here and we would not get redirected. If we were on the home page and our IP address was invalid, we would get redirected to the maintenance page. So I hope that makes sense there. This right here is a very, very important step. Otherwise, it will not work. Now, in our side of our other check, I'm going to continue the redirect here in just a moment, but we're going to do our other one here, and that is for if we have chosen a URL over here. So if we've chosen a URL, then we're going to do a check that says if this is false, right here, and CMM underscore options redirect URL. This is the option name that contains the URL that we want to redirect to, is not equal to blank. So basically, if it's not empty, then we'll perform the redirect. Okay, so now each of our functions, each of our conditionals is written, and we are ready to actually do the redirect. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use the WP redirect function. Okay, there we go. So what we've done is we basically said redirect, and then with get permalink, we're actually getting the URL of the options page. So basically, if you have the maintenance page selected here, when we do the redirect, it's going to go and obtain the address of this page. So this will actually work regardless of what your permalink structure is. This is much better than manually hard coding the page URL. And then what we need to do is we need to follow this up with an exit. This just makes sure that the code stops right here and doesn't do anything further. Okay, and now we're going to copy and paste this into our other function, except we are going to change the page to just this right here. We're going to get rid of the permalink, and we're going to, oh, that's not what I meant to do. We're going to get rid of the permalink, and now all we're going to do is output the redirect URL that we've entered right here. So in my case, it would be google.com. Okay, and that's it for this function. This function is now done. And what we need to do now, in order for this function to be called, what has to happen is it has to be run every single time a page loads. Well, the easiest way to do that is using an action hook called template redirect. This is a action hook that fires every single time a page is loaded when WordPress is detecting which template file should be used. And now we're going to pass our function name as the callback function for this hook, and we're going to set a priority of 0. The reason we're setting a priority of 0 is just because we want to make sure it runs really, really early. You could probably set it to 100 or 200 or whatever you want. It would still work fine, but we're going to set it to 0 just to be careful. Now, this function is going to run every single time your page is loaded, and technically it will now work, with the exception of we don't have our IP function yet. So let's write our IP address. So this function is CMM underscore IP test, and it accepts the array of IPs. And now this function is really simple, and all we do is this: if not in array. So remember that our IPs are being passed as an array. Then we're going to use the PHP global constant. I guess it's just a constant, not a global constant. Remote address, and this is actually a constant that contains the current user's IP address. So basically we're saying if the current IP address is not in the array of IPs that we set up over here, then we want to return true. Otherwise, return false. Oops, actually I did that slightly backwards. Sorry, we want to do if it's in the array, then we will return true. Otherwise, we will return false. Otherwise, it's always going to return false. So there we go. So now if it's in the array, we're going to return true. That means that the current user is validated and they are authorized to access the site. Otherwise, if they're in the array, it's going to break the function right here. Otherwise, it's going to jump out of the brackets and it's going to get here where the function will return false. So you can see up here, if this function returns false, then we're going to do the redirect. Same thing up here. So that's now it. Your plugin is now completely complete. It is finished. And let's take a look at how this actually functions. So I already showed you the redirect page. So let's just do this one more time. Just to remind you, so if we are on a page, let's say that we have set up our IP. This is the IP that should have access, which, FYI, this is not my current IP address. We want to redirect them to the maintenance page. So if I go here and try to browse the site, notice I am always redirected back to this same maintenance page. It never leaves. I can't get anywhere else. Now, if I go back over here and change it to sample page, I get redirected to the sample page, and I cannot get out of it. So you could set up the sample page to be anything you wanted. Or I can redirect to a URL. And in this case, when I try to load the site, I'm going to go to Google. There we go. I got redirected to google.com. So that's it. The plugin's pretty simple. It may seem a lot more complex than it is, but it's extremely useful too. So I hope I've been able to help you and give you an understanding of how this plugin works. And I hope you take it and expand it, improve upon it, give it more features, etc. So let me know what you think. Please leave your feedback in the comments. If you have any problems, comment as well. Or if you just want to say thanks, comment as well. Great. So thank you very much. Have a great day.